we don't have any wine. This isn't an episode of Halfway Planet without wine.
Sure it is.
Why? How?
Well, we faked it the last 2 times.
Don't give away our secrets.
And we had milk.
We did have milk. Okay, so anyway, today I'm going to put this one on the spot. You don't know about this. So obviously we're going to England in May, and I've been talking a lot, as I do, about myself and my own nostalgia for going back to England. But of course, not so long ago, as in 11 years ago, you also lived in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And so today, what I'm going to do is give you, or rather, Tarah's going to give you, an American perspective on living in England. So this was actually 2005. That's when we met, when you were a student at Lancaster University.
Yes.
Firstly, what do you remember about your first day in England?
So I was on my own. I had insisted upon staying in London for a few days before the trip actually got underway. I was part of one of those study abroad programs with my university, and it was a situation where we were supposed to meet at a certain place at a certain time and then go through an orientation and then go off to our respective universities. But I decided to be a rebel. Since my dad had spent a good portion of his childhood and teenage years in Europe, I decided that I would follow in his footsteps, or at least so I thought I was doing at that point, and spend 3 or 4 days before the orientation started in London on my own, having never been to a foreign country before. So I step off the plane, and of course I'm jet lagged because I've been flying overnight, and I go through customs, and everything is pretty easy. I had kind of, an angry customs official, but I think most people do. So that's just not something that I even think of as dramatic. Then I had a lot of trouble finding my hostel. I was lost for probably most of the first day that I was in London and really jet lagged. And I was kind of in that mode where you're hazy and you don't know what's going on and you're so tired you can't even really think straight, until I got finally to a restaurant that I didn't know at the time but was about a block away from my hostel in American terms. And went into a restaurant, and I believe it was an Italian restaurant, but I don't remember. And I ordered something off the menu that I recognized, and then I ate it, and then I tried to tip the waiter, and he got irate with me and would not allow me to tip him, and he got very, very frustrated with me over the situation. So I just didn't know what to do. I threw the tip on the table and literally grabbed all of my bags and ran out the door. And then I finally found my hostel, like I said, about a block further down. Looking at a map because, analog. We only had just flip phones at that point.
Bless those days.
Yeah. I proceeded to drink my first legal alcohol that afternoon in the bar.
Yeah, she doesn't remember any of that. But on the subject of that tip experience, we've come to find that that's not really typical. That person losing their rag over that. That's even among English waiters. If you tip them, they'll take the tip and be grateful for it. It's just not a tipping culture in England. This guy was probably just had a bad day, I suppose. Now, you spoke a moment ago about following the footsteps of your dad, but I understand that you also followed in the footsteps, the bare footsteps of Paul McCartney. You went to Abbey Road.
I did. Another time that I got really lost. It took me 4 hours from my hostel to get to Abbey Road, and it really shouldn't take that long. But I went the wrong way and then got off at the wrong stop and proceeded to walk for a good 3 and a bit hours before I realized I was going the wrong way. And I finally turned around, went to Abbey Road, and
What's that?
I mean,
Is it just meh?
it's a road. It's actually kind of a busy road, and it's hard to walk across it because it's so busy.
Is that VW Beetle from the album cover still in the picture? Still
No.
there? No, that wouldn't make sense. That'd be a big parking ticket. I can imagine it's kind of dull. I mean, it's like, yes, it's an iconic photo, but it's just a road. But you spoke just then about, back in the day, in our day, right? We didn't have all of these sort of digital maps and all of that. We got lost a few times, I think, during that sort of, that first year while you were there. I remember the one trip where actually, this wasn't a maps issue. I think it was just a train not running at that time of night issue. But coming back from Liverpool, we got stuck in Preston.
And that wasn't the first time, nor would it be the last. But it was the worst time for sure, because there were no trains going out and all of the hotels for some reason were booked. So we ended up having to get a black cab.
Was it black?
Yeah.
Like in London?
It was.
Wow, I don't remember that. That's
I
crazy.
do, because I don't know why I do, but I do. So it was a black cab, weirdly enough, in the north of England. And before that happened, and maybe this is the reason why I remember it so vividly, my favorite hat got run over by a car.
It was just an all-round bad night. Your hat got run over by a car. We had the biggest taxi fare ever, and we were stuck in Preston. Joking, no offense to Preston. That's the only time I've really been there. So
I've been to your TK Maxx a number of times because, again, it wasn't my first TK Maxx.
TJ Maxx. Where's TJ Maxx? Is that here?
Here.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I've been living here too long. It is. You're right. Carry on, as you were.
So, TK Maxx, yeah. Like I said, I got stuck in Preston a lot for some reason. So, I've been to your TK Maxx across from the station. If it's still there, I don't know.
So, you were stuck in Preston and TK Maxx, and your hat got run over, and we had an expensive taxi fare. It's the worst story I've ever heard now. I'd forgotten all about most of this. I was asleep for that taxi ride.
I mean, I think I was too, but that was, 3 in the morning or something? So...
It was late. But we don't want to make them believe that your time in the United Kingdom was just a myriad of weird stories or even difficult hardship. There's no such thing as easy hardship, I suppose. But, what are some of your favourite memories from specifically that first year living in the UK?
I just loved walking on the cobblestones. Yeah, I really loved the experience of living in a place that was pseudo countryside because Lancaster University is actually outside of the city center instead of mired within it.
And I understand that as well. We used to do a lot of walking, around the countryside. In fact, one of my favourite memories is when we walked all this way to this little village, I suppose, called Galgate. I think that's where we realised we were both in love with me. And it was just a really good night, listening to some beautiful music. Well, speaking then of Lancaster itself and the city, or just cities in general, what are your sort of memories of cities there versus cities there? Are there any sort of major differences that stick out?
Cities here versus cities there?
Yes.
I mean, our cities are bigger.
Sprawling, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
very spread out here, like a lot of the country in general.
They're not more highly populated necessarily, but it sometimes feels that way, just because you do have to go so far to get anywhere.
We went to a lot of places. We went to London together. We went to Cambridge. We went to the Lake District. Of all the places we went to, which one sort of speaks to you most in terms of your memories?
In terms of my visualization, I can still picture going to Canterbury and looking at all of the different areas around Canterbury because it was a very walkable city. But I think more than anything else, Lancaster, of course, sticks out in my mind, and going to Edinburgh as part of Warhol, which was a show that we were in 2006, and all of that is what just remains in my memory more than anything else.
Well, it's funny because the three cities you mentioned there, thematically have in common their sense of history, but mostly from an architectural standpoint, it's all around Lancaster, it's all around Canterbury, it's high up on the hill in Edinburgh. Is that something, and I think I know the answer to this, but is this something that, really spoke to you, I think?
Absolutely.
In England?
In Lancaster specifically, one of the reasons why I chose it is because of the history with the Pendle Witches and all of that sort of lore surrounding the specific location. I love everything about the history when it comes to the UK. That's one of the reasons why I'm a huge Anglophile.
Yeah, it's interesting that because I often hear of people saying that it's almost akin to how people have a love of the royals from here in the United States. It's something that they in this country can't necessarily relate to. While for a fact I have a great appreciation for American history, it doesn't physically present itself so routinely, I suppose, as you would find in the United Kingdom. I mean, for example, in my hometown, there is a church there that I was christened at, in fact, from the 1200s, and this is sort of quite routine.
Right, and yeah, here, when we think of something that's really old, we're thinking of, the 1800s, the Victorian era, and not generally speaking, though there are, of course, some exceptions to this. Quite a few, but a lot of people just don't know that they exist.
Right, Native American.
Right.
Sort of, yeah.
We just think of a Victorian era building as being really old and really cool, which don't get me wrong, they are.
The people, right? You obviously grew up around Americans for the most part and probably saw British people on television, but I don't think from our communications that you'd met too many British people. Did you find that fundamentally there are personality differences, on the whole, has to be a generalization, between British people and American people?
I feel like you're setting me up for failure.
Yes, I am. That's why I did it.
Yeah, so there are certainly personality differences, but I'm not sure how to say them in a nice way.
You'd have to generalize, I suppose, if you were to do it. If there were observations that you have. I don't know. Maybe it's something about the sense of humor. That's often something that's spoken about.
The one thing that I will say is that I feel like, and this is a vast generalization, for sure, but British people seem to be more open to the concept of humans making mistakes and being human.
That's often the center of their humor, I think.
Yeah. So everything is very self-deprecating. Everything is very kind of ironic. There are twists and and turns and things to the way that they like associate the human condition.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans, like, we're very straightforward.
Yeah.
We're trying our best always to succeed. There's a definite difference there. Like, it's like they just accept that they are who they are and they're going to go on with it. Or at least that was my impression when I got over there.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting to sort of get that side. When I spoke to you, it was when I met you, and I think, and met any other Americans at university, you know, there was the real directness about people that sometimes, if you're not listening carefully, you can mistake it for rudeness, and it isn't rudeness. I know that for a fact now, but it often translates that way, and I think that's why people often misperceive Americans to be rude.
I wonder also if maybe a little bit of that has rubbed off on you. I guess we're going to find out, right, when we go over there and we film a little bit.
So they'll think I'm a belligerent little sod, I suppose. Interesting. We talked before, I think, about, many times, in fact, about sort of words that were lost in the pond, lost in translation over the time. Did you have any initially, early on, that tripped you up?
You know what? I have one. So this isn't necessarily a word difference, but it certainly is an intonation difference that really caught me off guard for most of the time that I lived in Lancaster. Afterward, once I got it and I had that aha moment, it was fine. For most of the time that I was there, people were asking me, "Y'all right?" And I would think that there was like something wrong with me, like, "Are you all right? Is everything okay?" When in actuality it was just a greeting.
Yeah. You're right. How's it going, love?
And I really thought that that I had a problem. I looked sad or I looked angry or something all the time when they were literally just saying hello.
Food. You like food. I like food, right? And back in Britain, we certainly ate our fair share of British food. Some of it is much maligned, I think, by the rest of the world, mainly France. So, you know, things like fish and chips. You got a lot of the fried stuff, and also Yorkshire pudding. All these, not necessarily healthy for you, but in my opinion, exquisite foods. How you've taken to them very well. Are there any that really stand out to you?
I think that a lot of them have a really interesting history. And, you know, you mentioned fish and chips. And the point that that's kind of like the working man's takeout, and that was the first time when people actually had disposable income that they could go and eat this food that tasted amazing, wasn't great for you, but tasted amazing and was a lot more filling perhaps than some of the food that they otherwise would have been eating. Just is incredible to me. And in terms of British food, I feel like a lot of times it gets left out of the culinary discussions. I love French food and I love Italian food. I love Asian food too, all kinds of Asian food. British food has its own history as well, and it's a very deep and really interesting history too. And it kind of, I liken it a lot to kind of a deep Southern tradition as well. There are a lot of weird crossovers there, and I appreciate both of those culinary approaches. I like to experiment with both Southern and British foods because of that. And so I don't think that we can discount it. I think we just need to eat a little bit of it. Although that said, you guys also have a really great tradition of vegetables and of gardening.
True, it is true. We do have it's weird, we do eat all of these fatty foods, but we do have an appreciation of the outdoors, and the gardening lifestyle is really big over there, growing your own vegetables, which is something you've taken on here in Chicago.
Well, I'm starting. I haven't actually started the process yet because it snowed yesterday in April.
Nearly May.
What in the world? but I get closer every time. I already have everything that I'm going to be planting. I just actually have to get it started before we go over to the UK.
And so, very quickly to finish with then, anybody that's thinking here from this country, the United States, or any country outside of the UK, that's looking to visit that very country, what advice would you have for them for sort of just settling in generally in those first few days?
Find someone who knows the ropes, and that could be, again, like if you're with a tour group or you have like a study abroad experience that you're working with, make sure that those people know what your concerns are, and make sure that you've planned ahead of time so that you can talk to them about any concerns you might have. Remember, these people, they go back and forth there every year, probably multiple times, so they're going to know exactly what you're talking about, and they'll be there to help you, especially if you're like, it's your first time ever going to another country. In America, at least, because it's such a big country, a lot of people only go outside of the country a few times in their life. And so if you go with a tour group, you can talk to them. Certainly, we are available as well. We have, of course, our YouTube channel. We check the comments here. We check the comments on Facebook and Instagram. If you have questions, then we can certainly point you to people who know the answers. And I just launched my blog, which is actually a little bit about British food. I have a sausage rolls recipe on there that's pretty popular right now, and I plan on adding a whole lot of different things in the future since I've got years of experience of making stuff for him.
And on top of your website, around the sausage roll, you've just launched your Patreon account.
Yeah!
What's the address?
It's patreon.com/oldfashioned_AF.
So if you are interested in British cooking or indeed vintage lifestyle, Tara is your go-to woman, especially with her new hair that's evolving. I mean, it's not quite there yet, is it?
It is very much in the first stage of many to come in terms of this whole blonde adventure that I'm going on.
I think it looks great. And
Well,
once
you.
it gets full platinum, Marilyn, we'll talk about that marriage of ours. Thank you for joining me on today's show, Tara Cantrell. Hope to have you back again on our show, Halfway Planet. And thank you all for tuning in. Have a great time what you're doing. This is so unprofessional. Bye.
I'm going to do the outro today because I wanted to tell you a little bit about my own website, which I launched earlier this year. It's called oldfashionedaf.com, and it has mostly just recipes right now, but I'm going to be writing a lot of vintage stuff. So we're going to talk about vintage lifestyle. I'm going to talk a little bit about my marriage to Lawrence and what it's like to be married to a British man. It's going to be a lot of fun, so you can go and check it out. If you would like to check out my Patreon page that goes along with Old Fashioned AF, then you can do so by going to patreon.com/oldfashioned_AF. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Halfway Planet. You will notice that there are a lot of names on this side of the screen. Those are our patrons. Our patrons who pledge $5 or more a month are going to get a postcard when we go to the UK next month. If you would like that to be you as well, you can go to patreon.com/lostinthepond, pledge $5 or more a month, and then you can get a postcard as well. So keep that in mind. Over here, we have another video, and you can watch some more Lost in the Pond, or you can subscribe to Lost in the Pond by punching Lawrence's face.
Only I'm allowed to say that. That's my catchphrase.
Do whatever you like.